All right, everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's March 30th, 2022. My name's Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator, and that means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your teams and showing them the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started and find out if we're a fit. For those of you new to the call, the format is informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. For those of you joining from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/officehours. Everyone is invited. Everyone's welcome. The more the merrier. So we host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded. We'll automatically post a recording of this session to our YouTube channel. So if you enjoy the content and want to support our channel, hit those like and subscribe buttons. It really helps us out a great deal. Just go to youtube.com/cloudposse. Again, that's youtube.com/cloudposse. So with that said, let's jump right on into some announcements. Got a ton here and even more from AWS. I love Vlad. So let's see it here. So the one that just stood out, it came across, why can't I get out of this? It popped up in my reader just before this call, was an announcement that Solomon Hykes, the original founder of Docker, has come out now with his own startup. He has left Docker, of course, after that was sold to Mirantis. And now this is building a platform. I just skimmed through this. The gist of what I got was that it had some aspects of HashiCorp's Waypoint to me, in that build a generic tooling that works, that is inherently consistent and packages up everything you need to deploy something, from the CI to the artifacts to the continuous delivery aspects of that, and then provide a registry type of system to back that they're calling Dagger Universe. Now, this also reminds me of some other projects I've seen. I forget the other one. We've talked about it on office hours, where what they're trying to do is generalize the concept of what it means to be CI, generalize the concept of what it means to be CD, such that you can put it into your Jenkins, you can put it into your Circle, you can put it into your GitHub Actions. You don't have to change. It doesn't matter what your CI or CD system is, that you can have a generalized way of doing these things. And the benefit with that is you can also do that locally. So I'm reading a lot into this between the lines. I haven't checked it out personally, but that was the gist of what I got here. So, this line here in particular: Dagger lets DevOps engineers write their pipelines as declarative models in Q, which stands for configure, unify, and execute, which is what made me think of Waypoint. And they are not trying to replace your current CI or CD systems, which is that point down here. Has anybody already heard about this or been kicking the tires deeper than I have?
If they're going for GitHub Actions, because GitHub Actions isn't a particularly fabulous product, but it's really awesome in the community. There are a lot of awesome actions that can do a lot of really nice things, and it's super easy to integrate. A more flexible and wider supported alternative to GitHub Actions is something that would be awesome, and I look forward to seeing if they deliver on that. Other than that,
I think their specific point is they are not meant to be a replacement for these things. They're not meant to be a replacement.
Run them whatever, doesn't matter. The idea is you're gonna use Dagger, you can use it whatever. You have a bunch of integrations with everything, which is nice, but it's also the value of another 12 startups that do the same thing around CICD. So I'm not gonna adopt it. I'm gonna wait and see what happens, which ones win. Like Earthly, that we are chatting about in the Zoom chat, it's also a thing. The community around that starts to be growing. It's something to keep an eye on. Dagger obviously got 20 million, which might mean they're gonna do something nice. I don't know. We're gonna see. I have hopes, but it's not something that I'm gonna be adopting. Also, I'm a
Yeah.
bit reluctant about, yeah, just throw everything in a container so you have a shitty experience everywhere. Yeah, I agree with a lot of the points they're making, but I'm not gonna implement it today.
I think that's the risk with any new CI or CD solution is that you're putting this in the critical path of everything you're developing at your organization. And these are long-lasting decisions that stick with you for years. It's hard to adopt a new system, just as it's been hard for us to adopt like GitHub Actions. But
Also, this is like super bleeding edge in the sense that we barely have Docker caching working. Docker on macOS barely got not terrible file system performance in the latest release. Like, yes, we're all using containers, they're awesome, but the developer experience is not great. And for a CI/CD tool, the developer experience has to be top notch. So I'm not gonna implement it, but I'm eager to see what they come up with, and I'm gonna follow them on Twitter or RSS or whatever.
So I saw something about that this was recently March 17th. I didn't look at
Yep.
this and it wasn't on my announcements. Have they figured out a way to optimize the performance of the file system on Docker for Mac?
From what I've seen, yes. I haven't personally tested it, but some teams that I'm working with took this for a spin, and it's working surprisingly faster.
Hmm.
They're linking to a GitHub issue that has some benchmarks shared. So yeah, if you're doing Docker or macOS, definitely take a look at it.
That is cool. I'm gonna make a note of that.
But that also just like highlights how containers still need
It's
a lot of work.
yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. All right, next talking point. Google gets Markdown, kind of. They're doing it the way that like Confluence has Markdown or some of these other things, treating Markdown as a typo. So it will autocorrect your use of Markdown to what you actually meant to do in native Google Docs syntax. So for those of you that really, like myself, that are just used to using like hash symbols for chapter headings, you can do that now or coming soon. Next announcement, pretty diffs. I like this one. And this project has gotten so many stars and it made me scratch my head. It's like, wait, where's the releases thing? I didn't even know you could turn releases off on GitHub. So they are so anti-releases, they don't even have one. Yet it was kind of ironic in their documentation that they say they have releases. Regularly has releases that fix crashes. Great. I just was hoping to see them other than tags. So if you have a popular project with almost 6,000 stars now and no binary release for a Rust project that expects you to have a local development environment for that. Anyways, I digress. What's really cool about this diff tool is that it understands, you could say, the syntax of the file. So in this case, it understands that there's a conditional here that is wrapping now all of this text here, and it highlights that difference between what was here and what is here. It supports a ton of languages and markup formats, including JSON, as well as CSS and Go, and probably the languages you use. Anybody already kicked the tires on this? All right. Next announcement is a big one for anybody using Helmfile and has been following the project for some time. It's been a repository under Rob Ball's private GitHub for all these years here, and looks like Rob Ball has gone MIA maybe because Mimoshu and others haven't been able to reach him. So the gist of it is they want to move Helmfile now into its own organization under GitHub Helmfile, which makes total sense. There is a fork of it here. I would probably not depend on this just yet. If they do succeed, they will migrate over the other repository here, transfer it to preserve the stars. Otherwise, they're starting from scratch here, which would be unfortunate. Any other insights into this movement? It's amazing how many major projects and corporations now depend on Helmfile. So I think this makes a lot of sense. All right. This was another one. So HashiCorp has committed to more regular releases of Terraform. We now already see 1.2 alpha release. I think this is one of the first alpha releases for this, which adds some nice things like precondition and post conditions on data sources. So you can do better error handling and messaging. These messages also can have interpolations in them, so you can make more usable error messages in Terraform. Any other highlights that you guys picked up from this? All right. For most of you probably using GitHub, it's been incredibly frustrating for the past month with the number of outages that GitHub has been experiencing. They have come out and shed a little bit light on what's going on. They have a cluster, MySQL cluster, their main MySQL cluster, which has been falling over due to resource contention. And that's been causing, I guess, a lot of these outages. And they're committed, obviously, to addressing that fundamental problem. Can't wait to see it soon. GitHub has become like Twitter in the heydays. Do you guys, I don't know, I date myself now, I think, but anybody remember the fail whale of Twitter? I used to see this all the time on Twitter, but you don't see it anymore. The new one is GitHub 502. Yeah, this is the new fail whale. All right.
I do prefer a unicorn over a whale.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this how you say, very ferocious unicorn.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So that was that. This is super exciting for anybody who's been on Amazon for a long time. They made creating accounts very easy. They made shutting down accounts impossible. Well, they finally have official support in the API and SDKs for closing an account. Here's what that looks like. There is no Terraform support yet. Unfortunately, I guess they didn't tee that press release up with Terraform announcement. Maybe they didn't want to get DOS attacked with account deletions from Terraform users. Joking. So we'll see. We'll track this, hoping somebody has, oh, look at this. Somebody opened a PR 17 minutes ago. That's awesome. So maybe we'll see this soon.
Yeah, there's other Twitter thread that was that I read today, and they were talking about someone creating 2,500 accounts because of the create account API.
Yeah.
And then they are trying to delete their accounts again, and there is a rate limit here that is allowing, like, I think 9 accounts deletions or something like that. So they were able to create so much accounts, but they cannot really delete them again.
Yeah, I know. So I know these limits are, you have to request the account limits and things like that. And I don't know, every time I request an account limit, I gotta come up with an amazing explanation of why we need it and get pushback and all those things. But I've heard people that have gotten things like 40,000 account limits, and it's just insane. So imagine if you had that.
Wow, 40,000 accounts for...
Yeah. Apparently they were able, I guess they were associated with an enterprise and were able to get that passed, but
That's insane.
It was in the tens of thousands. 40,000. I'm not sure if that a specific number, but it was in the tens of thousands. So, all right. Moving on. last one is, Wendy, Wendy, are you on the call today? I'm not sure. I haven't read this article, but you proposed in the office hours chat. Basically, I kind of read it with a grain of salt. I haven't taken a deeper look. The thing is that basically Google came out and raised the prices for some other service and reduced the prices for others. One thing I love and hate about Google is that, they make the decisions on what make business sense. It just sucks when that is contrary to your business. So when they shutter products or when they increase prices, that sucks. I think it's very rare that Amazon has increased prices on anything, more likely reduced prices, but Google has done this more than once, I think. So
Amazon only increase price. This is mentioned in Corey's article. Amazon only increased pricing once when they were forced to for sending SMSs to India. I don't know of another case where AWS increased prices. Like, you don't do that because a lot of the high-level executive discussions, as explained in the article, are what if price changes. AWS never increased prices, but Google did like 3 times. Very relevant for this Zoom chat is the GKE price increase, which went from you get free GKE clusters to now your cluster costs money. And they bundle that in with some reliability and la-di-da-di-da. It doesn't matter. At an executive level, this is creating some really, really, really dangerous precedents and some some very dangerous discussions are happening, and I'm going to leave it at that. Corey's article is way better on that.
Okay, I wouldn't be surprised then, based on your interpretation of that, Chatter, you heard, this sounds like one of those things they might end up walking back then, as the PR catastrophe is worse than the incremental increase. Like what Amazon did when they automatically enabled the guard duty for EKS in every account, which incurred a cost automatically after 30 days or something. That was a snafu.
Ooh, that is a great example. Yes. Nice.
Yeah, they walked that back. All right, so those are those announcements. Let's see here in the chat, I think, well, you were posting a bunch of other announcements, right? Let's see what was interesting over there, pulling it over to my view here. So Amazon RDS free tier is available now for DB T3 micro, Graviton 2 instances, RDS IPv6 support for, oh, interesting. So if you have just massive environments, like containerized environments, EKS environments, your RDS can now handle, I guess, all those connections on IPv6.
Know that this is for RDS service APIs specifically.
Oh, interesting. I wonder why somebody is pushing for that. Like, what is the, because the service API, that's just the control APIs. That's not the RDS. That's like not your Postgres database itself, right? So, yeah. All right.
I think RDS itself supported IPv6 already. I could be wrong.
Okay. More, oh, so interesting. So if your EC2 instance is a part of an auto scaling lifecycle, I assume this was auto scale group. This is different. I'm not familiar with this.
IDMS. So if you're calling, what is it, 169.254. something, where you get details about your EC2 instance, you now also get EC2 auto scaling events like, hey, you're going to go down for maintenance and things like that. It's not the most important announcement, but for some folks, it's going to simplify their scripts a tiny bit.
Yeah, take more preemptive actions, or maybe if you have monitoring agents like your Datadog agents, it's easier for them to harvest data affecting that instance that the agent is on, maybe. All right. Lambda supports ephemeral storage up to 10 gigs. The previous limit was 512. Wow, that is a pretty significant increase. We were just talking to a potential customer, and one of their challenges why they couldn't use Lambdas where they were working with incredibly large image files in the tens of gigs. So it's unfortunate that it's still capped at about 20, but you can use EFS, I guess, now with your Lambdas, right?
Yeah, but
No?
it's EFS. It's somewhat debate for those use cases. It's usually slow and expensive. But they added a couple of speed increases to EFS, which is confusing. Like EFS for me before was, it's expensive and slow. Only use it if you desperately need NFS. With the latest releases they did, I am confused, and it's getting into maybe it's becoming a thing. I don't know. I'm confused.
Yeah. All right.
Also,
Proton.
to be noted that this 10 gig storage does cost. It's priced competitively, but only half a gig is free. Anything above that is you're gonna have.
Isn't it priced just the same way EBS is priced, or is it different?
I don't know, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a good point, because then I assumed it was related to EBS, so you had all the standard toggles you might want in terms of IOPS and so forth, but maybe that's not the case.
You definitely don't get to configure that. You just get to configure the size of it, and that's all.
Oh, good nuance.
Performance should be scaling constantly and should not be a bottleneck, but that's a should.
Has anybody dabbled with Proton yet? It was announced, I forget, was it announced at reInvent or a little bit before then?
It was announced at reInvent in the keynote.
Yeah. So I just remember that in the GitHub repo for Proton, the first issue was Terraform support. So I guess they have come through now, and it's generally available. I know it was announced a number of months ago, but now it's GA. I'm just curious what that experience looks like using it with Terraform. All right. Let's see, any other interesting announcements here? Earthly.dev. For people, was this when we were talking about the Dagger announcement? Yeah. Earthly, this was the thing I was thinking of. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And Niv Weiss is sharing Datri. What is this? Prevent Kubernetes misconfigurations from reaching production again. Nice. Have you, Niv, have you looked at this or used it by any chance? Niv is in the chat here. He says he has. Let's see what it looks like. So it's a UI and a command line interface. One of the things, I love these UIs, but one of the things I always hate with them is they always leave authentication out. So it's up to you to figure out how to securely expose it. Just curious if SAML or OIDC is mentioned, which it is not. But okay, that's interesting. I'll add this and take a look at it, share more maybe next week if I get a chance to look at it some more. All right. Sorry, Niv, it's just hard to have the conversation in the chat for the live audience, so we'll follow up on that next time. Feel free to unmute yourself, though, if you want to discuss. All right. Moving on then to questions. I had a DM from someone named Andy. I'm not sure if they're on the call today, but I think it's relevant to others. It's come up previously, but I thought I'd share it just because he had like a specific example as well. So And he was, reaching out and said that he kind of felt like his, career was stagnating, or like he lacked some mentorship and how he could grow in his career. And if I knew of any, sites or people or companies that did that. And he shared an example here of mentor crews and somebody who is offering like DevOps mentorship. This is a person who leads DevOps at Epic Games. So it's interesting. Oh, it's interesting. I didn't realize that it could be paid here, for example. So I think this is I think this is mutually beneficial, right? Like if you are a senior person within your career and you, oh, look at that Academy Mastermind. Oh, I thought it was Master Point. Sorry, Matt Gowie, I thought you were linking your academy. You had one. No, this is something else. Okay, I'll look at that in a second, Michael Jenkins. So this is interesting. You can put yourself up and offer to provide mentorship. So interesting. Any other suggestions on mentorship?
I'll just jump in because I shared that Mastermind Academy link. I know the founder of Mastermind Academy, Aaron Brooks, and basically what it is it's not really mentoring. It's more of a boot camp style approach to cloud and DevOps and that type of thing. So it might not be exactly what the question asker is looking for. It's free though, so it doesn't cost anything to take a look at it. But the way that he does it is he has cohorts that go through specific topics over a period of time. And they cover cloud, they cover DevOps. They also do software engineering, so he goes into programming, that type of stuff. So it's not as specific as like, hey, I have this question or concern and I want to talk to a person to get mentored on this. You know what I'm saying? So it's a little bit different in that aspect, but hey, it's a resource.
It's like a, what do you call it? Like a Code Academy kind of thing, but online, virtualized.
Yeah, it's a Code Academy, but specifically for DevOps and cloud type stuff.
DevOps and DevOps adjacent, it looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks. Yeah, that's helpful. That's interesting. The in terms of this mentorship thing, I think it's great just in general to expand your network and reach out to as many people on LinkedIn and start following people. And then if you consistently see somebody who is interesting to you based on their posts and what they're working on, then I would reach out to them in a DM with a personalized message, explain your situation, explain where you're at, the trouble you're having. And I don't know. It's hard. Like it can be a little bit awkward if you ask for too much up front, but I would just start a casual conversation without expectation, without even bringing up mentorship, possibly even just, giving them credit for things that they have or they're working on and see where things go. I don't think you necessarily have to pay money to get mentorship.
I agree, and I'm jumping in. Sorry, because mentoring is near and dear to my heart. I've got a couple mentors of my own that I work with, and I agree with the points that you made. I would just also ask that if you're reaching out cold call, to somebody asking for mentorship, research their background if you can on LinkedIn. If they're published, read their articles. Ask them specific questions about work that they've done or articles that they published.
Is good one.
Exactly, and if you have a question or something that you need help with, be specific about that thing. And I guess I should say specifically to mention the things that you've tried and that you've already done. And
that's also really helpful.
The next step, because if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to be a DevOps engineer, how do I start?
How do I become like you? Yeah.
That's like it's a turnoff for me as a mentor, because it means I'm going to have to do a lot of work to bring this person to a particular level to even understand the information that I might want to convey to them. But instead of somebody that came to me and said, hey, I've already taken a cloud practitioner cert, I've toyed with Kubernetes, I know how to use GitHub Actions, and I'm trying to find a project that I could work on to use these skills. Can you recommend a project? That's a totally different approach than saying, hey, how do I do DevOps? That's like the most generic and put off approach that, you know, you can come to a mentor with. But so yeah, I just offer those suggestions for people who are looking for mentorship.
The other pro tip then related to what you say. So then when you get that answer from the mentor and he gives you something, now you're at a crossroads. Suddenly you're committed. Like if you were actually interested in what he has to say and he gives a bunch of advice or suggestions, but you follow none of it and you just keep asking, it's kind of interesting. It is very rewarding if you give some advice and then they say, hey, you know, that was great. I tried that out. I signed up for this course. I did that, or I went and got my cert for this, or I went and read that book. And then they come back and ask you questions. Now that is a really great way to approach it and continue a relationship.
Yeah, and this is the last thing I'll say, because I just want to piggyback on what you said. If people are giving you mentoring for free, then the payment that you can give them is, number one, validating or maybe even pushing back on the suggestions that they gave to say, hey, I tried this and it didn't work, but I did this differently. Or, yeah, hey, I tried what you said and it worked awesome. I learned X, Y, and Z, and now I'm moving on to A, B, and C. You know, that's just like all the more motivation for a mentor to keep on mentoring. That's total payment for a mentor.
It is payment for mentorship. Speaking from personal experience, I think we all like validation. So
yeah, no doubt.
It helps to get it from anyone, even a mentor. So, or mentee. Cool. Any other thoughts on this one?
For me, pay attention.
Code Mentor is another one Matt Gowie suggests here. It's another site to find mentors.
I've been a mentor on that site. Like I've been on the, helping end of that site, and it is like a pay for help type of thing. And it is more, hey, you have a specific problem and you want to talk through it. And, you can pay, a range of what you want to pay. And basically like put your issue out there and then just chat through it. So I don't do this often. I do it probably like a few times a year for people that seem like I could really help them. But if that's more what you're looking for, instead of the like long-term advice, like long-term type of thing, if you're looking for, hey, I want to try and understand this problem and understand how I can fix it better in the future, then spending an hour to pay somebody $80, I don't do this for the money. The people that seem to be really involved in it are really kind of just there to help out. I think that it's not too bad of a website, but yeah.
Cool.
The way that I approach it typically, like on Twitter, different people would be asking me about different things on how do I start in security or how can I start in application security. So what I did is since I'm repeating almost the same answer every time, I wrote a blog post sharing everything about that. And then my DMs are totally open for anyone at any time. So,
do you want to share that post?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, why don't you share that? And we'll incorporate it with the show notes.
There was one piece of advice that I sometimes give to people, which is GitHub is often the most amazing resource as you sort of drill into all the tools for helping you find people who are doing exactly the sort of thing that you're having a problem with. And it, often can be daunting if you're trying to do this through other networks, but in GitHub, spidering through all of the different repositories that people make public and, finding, specific instances of exactly the sort of solution that you're interested in. And also, looking at people's reputations, how many times they've been starred and forked and things like that. You can often find people who are just absolute experts relatively quickly without the use of any kind of a Rolodex or contact network. And they're often quite approachable.
I think people are super approachable, especially if you approach them without like expectations or in a non-scammy way, just as a person. Yeah, that's good. All right, let's move on to another question here. It's another one when Wedney asked in the office hours, also in the Terraform channel. I think it's a good one. It's something we've definitely had to deal with. I don't think that this is something that is Terraform specific. This is like when you work with open source, WTF when they don't accept the pull request that you want. What do you do? So this is an example that he brings up in the chat of AWS WAF v2. Terraform has no support for it yet. There's a pull request that adds support for it, but it's not moving anywhere. So what do you do? Well, we have had this problem, and the solution, you got to take it on a case-by-case basis. What I'm about to say isn't going to be the universal answer, but it's one of the feathers in your quiver. Well, what we ended up doing at Cloud Posse was we ended up just creating our own Cloud Posse Terraform provider, AWS utils. And what it is a stripped down version of the upstream official HashiCorp provider, except for we removed every single resource, kept the boilerplate, kept the like provider configuration stuff. And then we pull in things that we need that the community isn't providing. We did many things here in the beginning, for example, where it used to not be possible in Terraform to delete the default VPC. This has now changed as of very recently, but we then created a resource to delete the default VPC, or how to create IAM access keys that automatically expire. We implemented a resource for that. There was no way to do it in native Terraform. We tried. Or doing things with guard duty, like there are settings you couldn't toggle with Terraform APIs. Rather than spend the 2-3 months of excruciating pain to submit a pull request and get it approved or merged, we just do it here where we have full propriety over everything that happens. Your other alternative is, of course, just to fork the provider and add the GitHub actions to build and push it. This is, though, I really caution against going that route. I've seen this happen. We've done it in the past. It seems like it solves your immediate pain points, and it does. It's so easy to fork it and get the provider built and distribute it. But then you're on the hook for all the updates. Recently, I forget how long ago, like maybe 6 months ago, 4 months ago, they refactored the entire AWS provider, reorganized it, and then, we had to incorporate that into our kind of fork that we have of it. So it is a pain for maintenance that way. Let's see what the other recommendations were on this one here. So RB is recommending what we did here with our provider. Someone else recommended, well, did you consider using the new AWS CC provider? This is what's interesting. Apparently, the AWS CC Cloud Control API also doesn't support V2. And I thought that was Amazon's commitment now that everything was going to be in CC under the CC API. So. Any other?
Yeah, I can add something like more simpler. So I guess you can use AWS CLI, like write your own script to do one thing that's not supported with the provider and keep it like simple. Once it's supported, you can migrate, import resource back into Terraform. So that's one thing I do like most of the time.
That's an interest. It would be really interesting if somebody just wrote a CLI wrapper kind of for the, yeah. I know you can use the shell provider. I know there are other ways you can do it, local exec and whatnot. Just if there was a little bit more polished way, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I would avoid local execute. I will keep it like a stack approach, but this stack is not running on Terraform. It's all on CLI, AWS CLI.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do it with CloudFormation, but I hate CloudFormation, so that's why.
Yeah. And my understanding was the contract that anything supported by CloudFormation should now be supported by the CC API. That's what I thought it was supposed to be. So
yeah, me too, but not sure why it's not so popular.
Yeah. Let's see. I was just curious here. If we go to GitHub, if I search for Terraform provider AWS CLI in GitHub, has anybody attempted? No, doesn't look like any official attempts. All right, just curious. Next question. Ryan Smith, are you on the call today? We never got to your questions last week. Does not look like it, so we'll get back to that. And for what it's worth, I have been in touch with someone from Crossplane I'm going to get a personal demo with them on that and then decide on how we want to incorporate that demo into office hours, because I think it's really interesting and it's come up many times. Cool. Questions. Let's go into the office hours Slack. No questions that I see here. Let's go to the Zoom chat. Any, yeah, no questions here. Any questions?
Maybe it's not a question, but something that happened in the past few hours. So if your organization is running Java Spring, maybe it's a bad time for you because there is a critical remote code execution that was released in the past few hours, and there is no patch until the moment. So yeah,
another. Oh my God. Just can't get a break. Spring for shell.
yeah.
Joy, joy.
That's only my logo.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, exploits are now like mini products, right?
Just a trademark.
Yeah. Has anybody already been tasked with doing something for this? You said there's no known patch for it. Is there something one can do with WAF?
Yeah, that's the thing. The exploit was literally shared like 4 hours ago or something. So even that exploit is not really reliable. There is no way to build up a WAF detection, like proper WAF detection, until like there is a good like fingerprint of the exploit. So it's going to be like a hard week for like many of us.
Yeah, I'm sure. You know, what was it? Shell4j, or what was the last one?
Yeah, Log4j.
Yeah, the Log4j exploit. But what were they calling it? It was like Log4Shell.
I think.
Yeah,
I think, I don't know, something like that. Which was another pain that people are.
That was another one that I know kept many people up late at night. Yeah, Log4Shell. Yeah, that's what the brand name of that one was. Yeah, it's still pretty raw. That was December last year. Yeah, any other announcements or questions?
Can we ask spontaneous questions?
Oh, of course.
All right. I'm actually starting a role as a DevOps engineer at a startup next month on the 4th.
Cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. I've only been in just like a normal software engineer, although I'm interested in infrastructure stuff. But I was having a call with my manager, and he was talking about how like a certain team would like to just have their own playground off to the side where they can prototype things. And like theoretically, I don't think that that's a big deal. I can just an account, but I just wondered what do other people do in the organizations? How do you support that while still having them meet like certain security policies and whatnot?
I'd say there's 3-4 patterns and then variations of those playgrounds. First of all, you have like your platform playground, just Kubernetes. So like, do they just need a Kubernetes environment to play around with? Can you have a Kubernetes cluster like in a sandbox account that they can use? Namespaces, perhaps a namespace per engineer or something similar. That takes a lot of assumptions, right? That you're even using Kubernetes or something like that. The other assumption, the other 2 patterns I've seen is the AWS account per engineer, which leads to a lot of account sprawl and unregulated spend. Also, in management and compliance nightmare, you have to make sure you have good service control policies. I wouldn't do it if you don't have Security Hub and Guard Duty in place to make sure that bad things aren't happening in those accounts within your organization. So that leads us to the third option, which is the shared sandbox, or the set of like a discrete number of sandbox accounts, maybe by business unit or by team or by project or by month or something like that. And what you need to do then in those situations is ensure that there's some way that you don't get too, your spend doesn't get out of control. So you're going to need to have the budgets in place. AWS makes that easy. Datadog makes that easy. And then some way to wipe the accounts. And what we've seen or been using is like AWS Nuke. There's like 5 things out there that do this, but testing the cloudposse.co, we have an example. So then you have your configuration, which says that anything that doesn't have a specific tag, you should nuke it. And then you can run this on a scheduled basis. The alternative is, I believe there's some way to do it based on creation time. So you can automatically nuke resources that don't have a tag that were created over some amount of time ago.
That's very helpful. It's good to hear the patterns that others have been using to do this.
The last thing I would say, like, depending on how security conscious they are, since it's a wild west and what you can do in the sandbox account to a large degree, depending on the service control policies, you might want to consider setting up some basic guardrails around at least no public S3 buckets, maybe, or maybe no public services, that everything has to go through a corporate network or VPN or something, just to reduce the likelihood that this becomes a major PR incident or snafu, because this is what a lot of these hacks have been. Like, somebody finds an S3 bucket that was in a sandbox account that happened to have some customer data, which should have never even been there. It happens. So just avoid those PR nightmares by putting those controls or guardrails in place. Michael Jenkins.
Yeah, can I offer some testimony on pretty much every single one of the points that Eric just made? Because I've been there and done that for just about all of them. The one, I guess the way that my organization landed is that we do have, we have separate accounts for environments for some products. So just say we got them, right? So in the test or development account, what we do there is we allow access based on a role. So it's kind of Wild West. You can do whatever you want, but you can only do it within the scope of the permissions for the role that your user account is granted. So you're not really an admin. You might have power user, but you can't create other users. You can't create other roles, that type of thing. Unless like you're doing something terraforming that needs that permission, then maybe we can grant that. But the critical thing that I would add is that if you're letting developers work in a Wild West type account, like open whatever, but they're developing or they're trying out things that they intend to deploy to your production account, what we do is we still have the same security guardrails in our test account, because we don't want them to get comfortable doing something that's not going to be allowed in a production account, because there's a potential that they can say, oh, well, I was able to do X, Y, and Z over here. And then they try to do it in production, and that like open security group just gets deleted automatically. Well, if they grow up learning that that's the case, then they won't have that problem once they get to production.
Those are good pointers. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Any other questions we can get to today? Got about 10 more minutes on the clock.
And just to circle back, I would say that like this is a good example of mentoring right here.
Yeah, duh. Why didn't I think about that in my answer to Andy? Like, well, did you think about office hours? No. So yeah, this is a mentorship opportunity right here in office hours every week, really.
I thought it was really interesting to hear that people were offering sandboxes as maybe a form of incentive to, help the mentoring. I haven't really seen that pattern since many years ago. I used to work for a major magazine, and they used to do that sort of thing to attract engineers to help work on the magazine. Was they had a kind of an employee net where you could put your own personal projects, and people had all sorts of fascinating things there. Actually, Apache.org got started that way, if I remember, many years ago. And it's interesting to see that sort of pattern is maybe coming around again in an interesting sort of way. And I love the idea of having a various escalation of roles that are sort of standardized, that people are maybe accounted so that when you need to do a particular thing like recreate a database or drop and reload or that sort of thing, that's something that you assume the accounted role to do, and even if it's in a separate environment. I think that would help a lot towards towards making those environments a little bit safer.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. That's an incentive. Like, so that's an explanation. Like, all right, so the question was like, how would one go about doing sandboxes? But then this is answering a kind of related question, which is, why might you want to have sandboxes? And employee incentive is maybe one idea. It fosters kind of creativity and your 20% projects, so to say.
Yeah.
Slightly related to that, I was just curious, do people care about logging in sandbox environments?
Logging? First of all, I think that you're going to want to have logging just for reconstitution, like understanding if something bad happened from that account, you're still accountable for it, right? And then there's also, developers working there, like you can't really do anything if you don't have logging, and you can't really understand what the bugs are if you don't have monitoring and so forth. So there is an associated cost you're probably going to want to do. This is where the company might want to do some things in terms of cost to regulate it.
Yeah. And there are situations where it actually becomes a benefit even to the company, I think. If you've got a product like in the publishing world, for example, Wired Magazine had a product, which was their magazine online basically early on. And there was a group of developers who essentially started a new magazine that was just complaining about all the bad websites that were out there. It was called suck.com. And eventually suck.com's readership exceeded the total readership of Wired online. And so Wired acquired the company from their employee net. That's kind of a good example of the sort of thing that can happen. And I think to a large degree, it was something that they monitored very closely before they did it.
Yeah. All right.
Hey, Eric, there's one thing I wanted to ask about.
Yeah, go ahead.
Your folks and others, and this is something we've talked about a number of times, but I still find use in chatting about it, like tracking main on Terraform when you have dev, stage, and prod all in one mono repo, and the escalation of those changes going out to environments, and how like the culture around that, like I think that it kind of, maybe it's just a continuous delivery culture. Like as soon as you're done a feature, you're expected to take it to prod. But I would like to hear the Cloud Posse thought process on that, and others, who has an idea about, that ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll start by reintroducing the problem a little bit, what you're talking about, by going to this demo repo we have now. So the gist of it is that, companies working with Terraform have this problem where, yes, you have your root modules. You always would like those root modules to be more or less the same in every environment. But the reality is that there's a lifecycle associated with them, and that dev is going to be ahead of staging, which is going to be ahead of production for some period of time until they converge. I would say the most common pattern that companies have been following when it relates to that is some version of code duplication. Like you'll have if you're using TerraGrunt, you're going to have your TerraGrunt.hcl file in your dev folder, in your staging folder, in your prod folder, pointed to some root module pinned at some version. And that version is going to be pinned differently in each one of those folders. Or if you're using other hacks, you might be using Git submodules, Git subtrees, vendor, all these other options. And the problem with all these approaches is when you're doing development of a root module, a Terraform root module, the top level module that has state, and you're only doing that development against one environment, you're only seeing the impact of those changes in that one environment. So that's what we had been doing at Cloud Posse for years and years and years, and didn't really do anything about it until it was just too painful not to address. What made us change our approach was Terraform Cloud at the time. At least our interpretation of what Terraform Cloud was telling us to do led us down this path. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the right conclusion today, but I'm very happy with our conclusion. So what we do is we have one version of all of our root modules, always. And when we therefore do development, for example, against, like the EKS root module, in this case, it would be this cluster here. This would be the root module. We are seeing what the impact of those changes are in all three environments. So now is where I can kind of show a little bit more by going into Spacelift. I don't know what we have open here or what's running here right now, since this was not planned. So the gist of it is that we will have our components, these components like for EKS. Yeah, so we don't have any pending changes here. So I'm not able to really show what it looks like because everything is totally in sync. Well, I'm just trying to think how best to relate this. So here what I'm showing you is the EKS cluster. It's the blue EKS cluster in our live environment. And that EKS cluster is deployed into a sandbox account. It's deployed into an automation account. It's deployed into a dev account, a production account, a staging account. So there's there we see there are 5 EKS clusters online. All 5 of those clusters are pointed to exactly this cluster component. But when we apply the changes to that environment, that's when we release those changes to that environment. And that's what we can do with controls, with toggles. And this is what's so hard to do if you're trying to fit a square peg through a round hole. If you're just trying to use GitHub Actions, Circle CI, or some general purpose tool that works on VCS only, then you really are limited to doing version pinning and how you do that. In our situation, what we're saying is we're pinning an environment to a commit, and then in Spacelift, we're confirming it to that environment when we want to release it to that environment. Or if there are any changes that we don't like this discarded change here to a VPC, we can also throw away a change if we wanted to do that. But then there's a record that we deliberately discarded that change and that there's a incongruence in that environment.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I wonder what's the thought process around when you confirm those higher environments, right? Like you make a change to the cluster and it's going to plan and give you a update, a diff against dev stage prod. When do you apply to prod? And is that something that you think hard about and say, hey, we never let changes sit for more than 3 days, or we release to prod every Friday or something along those lines?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few, okay, so I painted a very rosy picture of how all this works. And it's always, turtles all the way down. Well, I say that's the wrong expression. It's always sunshine, but it is layers. In reality, there's layers to this. There's problems that happen. Some of the problems we see with this approach are problems we see at customers, which will be that what they'll do is they'll merge the pull request. Because that's no longer, merging the pull request doesn't anymore necessarily mean deployment to production. What it means is we want to deploy these changes to all environments at whatever cadence we decide to do by confirming those in that order. But what happens is people are concerned about getting their feature done, or they're working on these things, and sometimes they pile, things get confirmed in dev and staging, but that don't get confirmed in production, for example. So one of the things I would like to point out with Spacelift that is nice is that all changes are rolled out serially in the same order to every single environment. that means that every environment, even if we do it at different times or different cadences, is getting the changes in the same order. Versus like if you're doing git flow, what might be happening is that you're revving dev, then collapsing all of that into one commit merged into your main branch, rolling that into production. Now you're doing a totally different deployment process to production than you did for dev. So what I like about this process is that we enforce or ensure that commits to environments go out in the same order. The other
That makes sense.
The other thing
It's
you
still,
have,
yeah.
The other thing you were saying is like things that linger or stay around for too long. That's a problem we have as well. What we're doing to solve that is writing a bot that is taking the webhooks from Spacelift and sending them to Datadog. And this is a work in progress. It's not ready yet. But with this, sorry. But with this, we're going to be able to basically raise an alarm when something goes unconfirmed for too long. And this is a real problem. This is the same thing like forever PRs that stay open for too long. You don't want that, just like you don't want unconfirmed changes going out not going out in a reasonable amount of time. So I think a policy-driven approach, one where you nag for the behaviors you want, is what we're taking.
That makes a lot of sense, and that clarifies at least what you folks do. I still am interested in what other folks do in that regard, but like the Spacelift sequentially doing it. When I've built something similar with Spacelift, I've done it across branches, and therefore, yeah, they do get merged together, and you're not enforcing that sequential bit, which is an important piece, because when Terraform sequential changes get merged together, sometimes that can cause big headaches. Anyway, I've taken up enough time. But thanks.
One last thing I want to show, which is pretty rad. I'm just going to tease it out. We'll talk more when we do a more comprehensive demo in the coming weeks or months, now that we have all these things coming. The beautiful thing also with Spacelift, possibly Terraform Cloud and similar things, is that they use the GitHub deployment API. And if you're on Jira, they have deployments here. So now you can actually track the progress of your pull requests across all your environments. And when the work started, whether it's passing or failing, and if the work for that was fully done. So what you want to see is that this is not done until everything is green.
I've never seen this. That's super cool.
Yeah, I also love that you see this calendar-based timeline, so you can kind of see how the work is progressing, or if it's stalled out, or no changes have happened on this issue for a long time.
Sweet.
All right, well, we are out of time for today. More goodness of this nature to come on subsequent office hours. Just wanted to remind everyone, if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, head over to youtube.com/cloudposse and subscribe. It helps us out a great deal by doing that. If you haven't yet subscribed to our newsletter, we're going to be dusting this off and getting more serious about it. It's going to be showcasing all the links that we find here in office hours, as well as other things dripped to you on a weekly basis or monthly basis. So to register for our office hours, go to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com office hours. You'll get a invitation in your calendar so you can stay on top of our weekly events. If you liked what you saw today and would like to work with Cloud Posse at some point in the future, take our quiz. It's a great, best way to find out if we're a good fit for what you are looking for. Go to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz. Thanks, everyone. See you all next week. Same time, same place.